The conference room at Harrison Industries felt smaller than usual. Dad had called an emergency board meeting on a Friday afternoon, which meant he wanted maximum drama with minimum resistance. Mom sat beside him, her designer suit perfectly pressed, her expression the same one she wore when firing housekeepers. My older brother Marcus occupied the seat that should have been mine, the one marked Executive Vice President. I sat 3 chairs down next to the intern. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Dad began, his voice carrying that particular tone he used when he'd already made decisions and was just performing the theater of consultation. "Harrison Industries has reached a critical juncture. We've been profitable, yes, but we're not optimized. We're not lean. We're not positioned for the aggressive expansion this market demands." I took a sip of water and said nothing. The conference table was Italian marble, cost more than most people's cars. The chairs were ergonomic masterpieces that Dad had imported from Denmark. The view overlooked downtown from the 42nd floor. None of this was technically his. "That's why I've brought in Stratton Consulting Group," Dad continued, gesturing to the 3 suits sitting opposite me. "They've conducted a comprehensive analysis of our operations, and their findings are enlightening." The lead consultant, a man with silver hair and a watch that cost more than my car, stood up. His presentation clicker made a soft sound as the first slide appeared. "Harrison Industries, restructuring for maximum efficiency. What we've discovered," Silverhair began, "is an organization burdened by redundant management layers, unclear reporting structures, and several positions that exist more out of historical precedent than operational necessity." Mom leaned forward. "Tell them about the cost savings. Our projections indicate that by streamlining management and eliminating redundant positions, Harrison Industries could reduce operational costs by 37% while actually improving decision-making speed and market responsiveness." Marcus grinned. He'd been waiting for this moment since he joined the company 5 years ago. I'd been here for 7, but I'd never made a fuss about titles or corner offices. I just did my work, managed my projects, and apparently became invisible in the process. "The key," Silverhair continued, "is to consolidate authority in a clear chain of command. One vision, one direction, no confusion about who makes final decisions." Another slide appeared. Organization chart. Dad at the top, Marcus directly below as President and Chief Operating Officer, then a row of department heads. My name appeared in a small box labeled Special Projects Coordinator, a demotion of 3 levels. "Now, I know some of you might be concerned about these changes," Dad said, his tone suggesting he didn't actually care about anyone's concerns. "But this is about the future of this company. My father built Harrison Industries from nothing. I've grown it into what it is today. And Marcus will take it to heights we can only imagine. This requires sacrifice. This requires making tough decisions. Starting with unnecessary staff," Mom added, looking directly at me for the first time since the meeting began. The room went quiet. Everyone knew what unnecessary staff meant. The intern beside me shifted uncomfortably. "We'll be offering generous severance packages, of course," Silverhair said smoothly, "for those whose positions are being restructured. 3-month salary, continuation of benefits, outplacement services." I set down my water glass carefully. The sound of glass on marble seemed very loud. "Any questions?" Dad asked in a tone that suggested questions would be viewed as insubordination. James from accounting raised his hand tentatively. "What's the timeline for these changes?" "Effective immediately," Marcus said, speaking for the first time. "We're announcing the new structure Monday. Transition will be complete within 2 weeks." "This is about efficiency," Dad repeated. "About removing obstacles to growth. Some people understand business, understand what it takes to compete at this level. Others." He paused, looking at me. "Others are better suited to different environments. Less demanding environments." Mom actually smiled. "Perhaps something in education. Or nonprofit work. Something that matches your capabilities." I pulled out my phone and sent a single text message. Then I looked up at Dad, at Mom, at Marcus with his smug expression, at Silverhair and his team of consultants who just recommended firing a quarter of the staff to pad their own fees. "Are these changes already filed with the parent company?" I asked quietly. Dad frowned. "What?" "The restructuring plan. The new organizational chart. The terminations. Have they been submitted to the holding company for approval?" Silverhair looked confused. "There's a holding company?" Of course there's no holding company, Dad said irritably. Harrison Industries is privately held. I own it. This is my decision to make. Actually, I said, still speaking quietly, Harrison Industries is a wholly owned subsidiary of Harrison Holdings LLC. All major structural changes, any modifications to the organizational hierarchy, and any terminations above the level of department head require written approval from the holding company's board of directors. The room went very quiet. That's a technicality, Marcus said. Some legal structure Dad set up for tax purposes years ago. It doesn't actually mean anything. It means, I continued, that none of these changes can take effect without approval. It also means that this meeting, which was called as a board meeting, isn't actually a board meeting at all, because the board of directors of Harrison Industries reports to the board of directors of Harrison Holdings, and no representatives from the holding company are present. Dad's face was turning red. This is ridiculous. I'm not going to. His phone rang. He looked at the screen, frowned, and answered. Yes. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I could see Dad's expression change from irritation to confusion to something that might have been concern. What do you mean rejected? He said into the phone. I haven't even submitted anything yet. He listened for a long moment. How would they even know about? Yes. Yes, I understand. I'll call you back. He ended the call and stared at me. Really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. That was our corporate attorney, he said slowly. He just received a call from the holding company's legal team. Apparently, someone forwarded them the restructuring proposal. And it's been rejected. All of it. That's impossible, Mom said. The holding company is just paperwork. It's not a real thing. My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and stood up. If you'll excuse me, I need to take this call. I walked to the windows looking out over the city. Behind me, I could hear Dad demanding explanations, Marcus insisting this was all a misunderstanding, Mom saying something about calling their lawyers. Hello, Richard, I said into the phone. Miss Harrison, the voice on the other end replied. I've sent the formal rejection notice to your father's attorney. The restructuring proposal violates at least 6 clauses in the subsidiary operating agreement. Should I schedule a meeting to review the compliance requirements? Please do, I said. Let's say Monday morning. 9 a.m. Conference Room A. Conference Room A is reserved for board meetings only. I know. I ended the call and turned back to the room. Everyone was staring at me. I don't understand, Dad said. How did the holding company even know about this meeting? Because I told them, I said simply. I'm on the board of directors. I've been on the board since grandfather died and left me his shares. The silence was absolute. That's impossible, Marcus said. Grandfather left everything to Dad. He left the shares of Harrison Industries to Dad, I corrected. He left the shares of Harrison Holdings to me. All of them. Silverhair was looking between his notes and me with growing alarm. When you say all of them, I mean I own 100% of Harrison Holdings LLC, which owns 100% of Harrison Industries. Every share, every asset, every decision ultimately requires my approval. Mom had gone pale. But you never said anything. You never. I never interfered, I said. Grandfather's will included a letter. He told me to let Dad run the company, to learn the business from the ground up, to understand every department before I ever exercised my authority. He said if I did it right, I'd never need to interfere. The company would run itself. And if you did it wrong? Dad asked quietly. Then I'd know exactly what needed to change when the time came. I walked back to my seat, but I didn't sit down. I stood behind the chair, my hands resting on the Danish ergonomic leather. For 7 years I've worked in this company. I've managed projects, coordinated teams, solved problems. I've watched how decisions get made, how people get treated, what gets prioritized and what gets ignored. I've learned a lot. You've been spying, Marcus accused. I've been learning. There's a difference. I looked at Silverhair. Your consulting firm was hired without proper authorization. The holding company requires competitive bids for any consulting contracts over $50,000. Your engagement letter was for $300,000. That contract is void. Silverhair stood up. We have a signed agreement with Harrison Industries, which lacks the authority to enter into contracts of that size without holding company approval. Check your contract. Section 12. It's standard boilerplate, but it matters. You'll receive a kill fee for work performed to date, but your recommendations are rejected and your services are no longer required. The three consultants looked at each other, then began packing their materials. They left without another word. Now wait just a minute, Dad started. The restructuring plan is rejected, I said. Not just rejected, it's prohibited. The holding company's operating agreement specifically forbids any changes to executive compensation, organizational structure, or staffing levels that would interfere with the subsidiary's operational independence without board approval. And since I am the board and I don't approve, it's not happening. This is insane, Mom said. You can't just. I can actually. But I don't want to. I don't want to run Harrison Industries. I don't want Dad's job or Marcus's job. I just want to do my work without being called unnecessary staff in a room full of my colleagues. The remaining employees around the table were very carefully not looking at anyone. However, I continued, since this meeting has made it clear that there are some fundamental misunderstandings about corporate governance and authority, we need to address them. Effective immediately, all executive decisions above department head level will be reviewed by the holding company's legal team before implementation. This includes hiring, firing, compensation changes, capital expenditures over $100,000, and any contracts with outside consultants. You're putting us in handcuffs, Marcus said. I'm ensuring compliance with the corporate structure that's been in place for 7 years. The structure you all apparently forgot existed. Dad's phone rang again. He looked at it, didn't answer. That's probably Richard again, I said. Our corporate attorney. He's very thorough. He'll want to schedule a comprehensive review of all major decisions made in the last 3 years to ensure they were properly authorized. Some of them might need to be ratified retroactively. Some of them might need to be corrected. Corrected how? Dad asked. Well, for example, the compensation package Marcus received when he was promoted to executive vice president. That was a 40% increase, plus equity grants, plus a company car. All of that required holding company approval. None of that received holding company approval. Marcus went pale. I'm not saying it won't be approved, I added. I'm just saying it needs to go through the proper channels. Everything needs to go through the proper channels. That's how corporate governance works. Mom stood up suddenly. This is ridiculous. You can't treat your father this way. After everything he's done for you. What has he done for me? I asked, genuinely curious. Given me a job? Paid me a salary? That's not a gift, that's employment. I work hard, I deliver results, I've earned every dollar. What I haven't earned is being called unnecessary staff in front of my colleagues because Dad wanted to give Marcus a bigger empire to rule. That's not what this was about, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. No? Then what was it about? Efficiency? We're profitable. We're growing. Customer satisfaction is at an all-time high. The efficiency problem only exists in Silverhair's PowerPoint presentation. This was about consolidating power, eliminating anyone who might question decisions, and creating a clear path for Marcus to take over without any complications. I looked at my brother. He was staring at the table. I'm not the complication, Marcus. The complication is that you want to run a company you don't own, report to no one, and make decisions without oversight. That's not how this works. My phone buzzed again. I glanced at it. That's Richard. He needs me to sign off on some documents. The board meeting, the actual board meeting of Harrison Holdings, is scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m. All executive leadership of Harrison Industries is required to attend. We'll be reviewing the subsidiary operating agreement, discussing compliance requirements, and establishing new protocols for major decisions. I picked up my bag. One more thing, I said. That office you're sitting in, Dad? It's a beautiful office. Corner view, private bathroom, that ridiculous mahogany desk that cost $40,000. The lease is in the holding company's name. So is the lease for this entire floor. So is the lease for the company apartments, the executive parking spaces, and the corporate jet that Marcus has been using for weekend trips to Miami. I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. I'm not taking any of that away. I'm not interested in being petty. But I want you to remember, every single day, that everything you think you own, every bit of authority you think you have, exists because I allow it to exist. Not because you earned it. Not because you deserve it. Because I choose not to interfere. Why? Dad asked. Why would you let us believe we were in control? Because Grandfather asked me to. Because I wanted to learn. Because I hoped that maybe, eventually, you'd see me as something other than unnecessary staff. I smiled, but there was no humor in it. I guess we both learned something today. I left the conference room. Behind me, silence. Then the sound of Dad's phone ringing again. The weekend passed in a blur of phone calls and legal documents. Richard worked overtime preparing materials for Monday's meeting. The subsidiary operating agreement was a thick document, full of clauses and requirements that Dad had apparently never read despite signing it 7 years ago. "This is fascinating," Richard said during one of our calls. "Your grandfather basically created a corporate structure that gave your father complete operational freedom as long as he managed the company responsibly, but retained ultimate control at the holding company level. It's actually brilliant. Your father could do anything he wanted, except fire you, reorganize the executive structure, or fundamentally alter how the company operates." "He didn't know I owned the holding company," I said. "Even more brilliant. Your grandfather wanted you to learn whether your father would treat employees fairly when he thought no one was watching. Apparently the answer is no." Monday morning arrived cold and clear. I got to the office at 7:30 and went straight to conference room A, the boardroom. The one reserved for major decisions and important meetings. The one I'd never been invited to before. Richard was already there, setting up presentations and organizing documents. "Everyone's confirmed attendance," he said. "Your father, your mother, Marcus, and the 4 department heads who were in Friday's meeting. Also, I took the liberty of inviting Harrison Industries' CFO and General Counsel. They should be present for this discussion." Good thinking. At 8:55, people began arriving. Dad came in first, looking like he hadn't slept. Mom was with him, her expression carefully neutral. Marcus arrived exactly at 9, followed by the others. I sat at the head of the table. Dad started to sit in his usual spot, my spot, then caught himself and chose a different chair. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "This is the quarterly board meeting of Harrison Holdings LLC. For those who weren't aware, such a meeting was required and has been required for the past 7 years. This is the first one we've actually held, which means we have a lot to cover." I nodded to Richard. "The first order of business," Richard said, "is to review the subsidiary operating agreement between Harrison Holdings and Harrison Industries. I'm distributing copies now. Please turn to page 12, section 4.3. Papers rustled. People read. I watched their faces as they began to understand the implications. "As you can see," Richard continued, "all major operational decisions require holding company approval. This includes structural reorganizations, executive compensation above certain thresholds, capital expenditures over $100,000, any acquisitions or divestitures, and terminations of executive-level personnel." The CFO, a man named David who'd been with the company for 15 years, raised his hand tentatively. "Does this mean every decision we've made has been potentially unauthorized?" "Not necessarily," I said. "Decisions made in the ordinary course of business, within the scope of normal operations, are fine. But extraordinary decisions, the kind that would fundamentally change how the company operates, those required approval that was never sought. Because no one knew the holding company was real," Marcus said bitterly. "Because no one read the operating agreement they signed," I corrected. "Because no one bothered to check the corporate structure. Because everyone assumed that having the title CEO meant having ultimate authority, when the corporate documents clearly state otherwise." Dad cleared his throat. "So what happens now?" "Now we establish clear protocols," I said. "Richard has prepared a compliance checklist. Any decision that falls into certain categories gets flagged for holding company review. The review will be prompt, within 48 hours in most cases, but it will be thorough." "This will slow everything down," Mom protested. "It will slow down bad decisions," I replied. "Good decisions made for sound business reasons will be approved quickly. Decisions made for political reasons or personal reasons, or to benefit one executive at the expense of others, those might face more scrutiny." I pulled up a presentation on the screen. "Let's talk about specific examples," I said. "Marcus, your compensation package. The one approved 3 years ago when you were promoted." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "The package included a 40% salary increase, equity grants worth approximately $2 million, and various perks. The total value was just over $3 million. According to the operating agreement, Any compensation package over $500,000 requires holding company approval. Dad approved it, Marcus said. Dad approved it as CEO of Harrison Industries. But Harrison Industries lacks the authority to approve it without holding company sign-off. Which means technically the compensation package was never properly authorized. The room went very quiet. However, I continued, I've reviewed the justification for the package. Marcus had delivered strong results in his previous role. The compensation was within market ranges for similar positions. So I'm retroactively approving it as of today. Marcus blinked. You're approving it? I'm approving it because it was justified. That's how this works. Good decisions get approved. Bad decisions get rejected. It's not personal. It's business. I moved to the next slide. Now let's talk about the restructuring plan. The one that would have eliminated 27 positions, demoted another 12 and consolidated authority in a smaller executive team. The one that would have saved 37% in operational costs. I pulled up a different analysis, one Richard and I had worked on over the weekend. Here's what that restructuring actually would have done. Eliminated most of our institutional knowledge, created bottlenecks in decision-making, reduced our ability to respond to customer needs, and damaged morale throughout the company. The 37% cost savings was based on salary reductions, but it didn't account for decreased productivity, increased turnover, or the cost of rebuilding teams after the mass exodus that would have followed. Silverhair's presentation appeared next to mine, the contrast obvious. The consulting firm, I said, was paid to deliver a specific outcome, justify a predetermined decision to consolidate power. They weren't paid to assess what was actually best for the company. That's why their engagement is terminated. Dad was staring at the analysis. How did you put this together in 2 days? I didn't. I've been tracking efficiency metrics for 3 years. I knew exactly what the impact would be because I've modeled it before. Did you know we almost did this same restructuring in 2022? You got within one signature of pulling the trigger. I convinced James in accounting to delay the final paperwork until you got distracted by another project. The CFO, David, actually laughed, then tried to cover it with a cough. The point, I said, is that I've been here. I've been watching. I've been learning. And I've been protecting this company from bad decisions quietly without anyone knowing, because that's what grandfather asked me to do. I stood up and walked to the windows looking out over the city. Grandfather built this company with his own hands, I said quietly. He started with nothing, worked 80-hour weeks, sacrificed everything to create something that would last. When he got sick, he made arrangements. He gave Dad operational control because Dad had been working in the business for 20 years. But he gave me ultimate authority because he trusted me to preserve what he'd built. I turned back to face the room. For 7 years I've honored that trust. I've let Dad run the company. I've stayed in the background. I've done my work without complaint or drama. And it's been fine. The company has grown. We've been profitable. Life has been good. Until Friday, Marcus said. Until Friday, I agreed. Until Dad decided to restructure the company without proper authorization. Until Mom called me unnecessary staff in front of my colleagues. Until it became clear that my years of quiet work, my contributions to this company's success, counted for nothing. That's not, Mom started. It is though, I interrupted. You literally planned to fire me. You brought in consultants, developed a whole presentation, called a meeting, and announced plans that included eliminating my position. The only reason it didn't happen is because I own the company you were trying to restructure. The silence stretched out. So here's what's going to happen, I said, returning to my seat. Dad remains Marcus remains executive VP. Mom continues in her role in marketing. All the department heads keep their positions. Everything continues as it has been. Relief was visible on several faces. With 2 changes, I added. First, all major decisions go through proper channels. No more assuming that titles equal authority. No more restructuring plans that violate corporate governance. No more consultants hired without proper authorization. We follow the rules. And second, Dad asked. Second, I get a seat at the table. An actual seat. Not 3 chairs down next to the intern. Not special projects coordinator. In a box at the bottom of the org chart. A real executive position with real authority and a real voice in how this company operates. What position? Marcus asked. Chief Strategy Officer, I said. responsible for long-term planning, corporate governance, and major initiatives. Reporting directly to the CEO, with authority to escalate issues to the holding company board when necessary. Richard passed around a document. The updated organizational chart, he said. With the new position included. People studied the chart. It was different from Friday's proposed structure, but not dramatically so. Just one change. My name in a box at the executive level, right below Dad and parallel to Marcus. I'm not trying to take over, I said. I'm not trying to push anyone out. I just want to be recognized for what I actually do, what I've been doing for 7 years, and have a voice in decisions that affect the company I own. Dad looked at the organizational chart for a long time. Then he looked at me. Your grandfather would be proud, he said quietly. Would he? I asked. I'm not sure. I waited 7 years to speak up. I let you call me unnecessary staff before I showed my hand. Maybe he would have wanted me to be stronger earlier. Maybe he would have wanted me to take control years ago. No, Dad said. He wanted you to learn. He told me that once, right before he died. He said you were smart but untested. He said you needed to understand the business from the inside before you could ever lead it. I didn't know what he meant at the time. I thought he was just rambling. He wasn't rambling, I said. He was teaching. Both of us. Mom spoke for the first time in several minutes. I'm sorry, she said. For what I said on Friday. It was cruel and it was wrong. It was honest, I replied. You believed I was unnecessary. A lot of people probably believe that. I've worked hard to be invisible, to let other people take credit, to support without demanding recognition. That was my choice. But it stops now. I looked around the table. Any questions about the new structure? Any concerns about the compliance protocols? David, the CFO, raised his hand. The 48-hour review period for major decisions. Will that include access to holding company resources? Strategic analysis, market research, that sort of thing? Absolutely, I said. The holding company has resources that Harrison Industries doesn't. Financial modeling, legal expertise, strategic partnerships. All of that becomes available for properly submitted requests. That actually sounds useful, David admitted. It is useful, I said. That's the point. Corporate governance isn't just about oversight. It's about support. It's about making better decisions by having more information and more perspectives. The meeting continued for another hour. We reviewed financial reports, discussed upcoming projects, established new protocols. It was, in many ways, exactly the kind of meeting we should have been having for the past 7 years. As people filed out, Dad lingered. I really am sorry, he said. Not just for Friday. For not seeing you. For not understanding what you were doing all these years. You saw me, I said. You just saw someone who wasn't causing problems, who didn't demand attention, who did their work quietly. You saw exactly what I wanted you to see. Why? Because grandfather asked me to. Because I wanted to know if the company could run itself without my interference. Because I wanted to learn everything before I changed anything. I paused. And because I wanted to know if you'd value me for my work or just my name. And now you know. How I know. Dad nodded slowly. Chief Strategy Officer. That's a good title. A real position. You'll do well. I've been doing well for 7 years, I reminded him. Now people will just know about it. He left. I stayed in the conference room looking at the empty chairs, the documents spread across the table, the organizational chart with my name finally in its proper place. My phone buzzed. A text from Richard. Congratulations. Your grandfather would indeed be proud. Maybe he would be. Maybe he'd planned this whole thing. The secret ownership, the years of quiet observation, the eventual confrontation. Maybe he'd known exactly what would happen when push came to shove. Or maybe he'd just given me the tools and trusted me to figure out how to use them. Either way, I'd learned my lesson. I'd learned how to lead by first learning how to follow. I'd learned how to command by first learning how to serve. I'd learned how to take control by first learning how to let go. And I'd learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay silent and wait for the right moment to speak. That moment had come. That moment had passed. And everything had changed. I gathered my materials and headed to my new office. The one Marcus had been using as a storage room for the past 2 years. It needed cleaning, needed furniture, needed everything. But it was mine. Earned, not given. Fought for, not inherited. And that made all the difference.